Good evening and happy Sunday to you all. So, after watching the video and doing the readings, I thought the first concept in the video was, one, gender awareness and how there isn't enough news coverage on cops brutalizing African American females as there is cops brutalizing African American males. Two, was that when the facts don't fit into an available frame, people find it hard incorporating those new facts in their way of thinking about how to solve a problem. And for number three, what was shown in the video with intersectionality was that when social dynamics come together to create unique problems, it can be hard to solve them. So in the video, she used the example of the African American woman trying to get a job at a plant. However, because she was a female, she could not get the job in the factory. And because she was black and not a white female, she wasn't able to be a secretary. When these come together, it's the traffic, like in the example with the hiring policies. As for the reading, the biggest concept I got from it was that white as a race has nothing to do with biology, but rather with humans and power. The category white is intersectionality by having structures like class hierarchy and gender oppression that work to constitute whiteness and patriarchal economic power. Because prior to 1681, there was no designation for a group in law as such. And prior to the designation of white and not white, it was common for African American men to wed European women. People of the same class treat each other equal as a general rule, and in their wills, masters wanted to free their slaves and have them be equal members of society. However, when new laws arose, they used them to divide and conquer. One law had made a difference between British and other whites as compared to African Americans and those of native tribes. A second law made it illegal to set those of African descent free from slavery. The term white, as applied to people, was constructed, invented, and imposed after Bacon's Rebellion. And Bacon's Rebellion was the representation of laborers, freed servants, and small landowners, and this presented a unified threat against the capitalist plantations, which were Virginia and Maryland's political foundation. After Bacon's Rebellion had failed, a new set of laws had made it so that if you were African or a descent of an African, it meant that you were to live your life in servitude. If you were a non-white, you were inferior to a white. After Bacon's Rebellion had failed, it had meant that if you were African or a descendant of an African, you would live your life in servitude. If you were a non-white, you were inferior to a white. But if you were white, you were valuable. The new laws that came about after Bacon's Rebellion were as such. 1. You could not testify if you were black in testifying against a white. 2. If you were black, you could not hold any weapons. 3. A lashing would be served to you if you were black and you raised a hand to a white. And 4. It limited legal standing as well as their virtue and ability to protect their family and preserve bodily integrity. These laws would change how society would work, and together made a structure that devalued the humanity and dignity of someone who was not considered white. This shows how the concept of white came into being through legal imposition and enforcement. It was a means to split workers in service of exploitative capitalism. In addition, there were 3 more laws that would restrict the legitimate rationality and the economic advancement of those who were not considered white. One was the common naturalization. The anti-miscegenation laws enforced human difference through the constitution of families being separate and distinct, while the naturalization law made communities separate and distinct, but by asserting that whites in law and assigning significant meaning and value to whiteness as a matter of national law and policy, it has given it power and profoundly affected the United States. For question 2, what does Battalora mean by the invention of white people as a racial category? And to me, it meant that white was more of a show of power, and that these days those who are white still have that power, but by no means is it actually biological, more of a show of power. For question 3, I think that helps us to realize that white was a term for those who had select power, and these days it does not necessarily apply to those who are considered white. And that the simple terms like black or white may have a deeper meaning with a longer past that we don't understand. To me, for number 4, intersectionality is how social categorizations like race, gender, or color may overlap to create disadvantages and discrimination. For number 5, I think it is important to understand intersectionality because it shows how different systems can cause injury to a person's well-being. And for 6, I work at a high school running detention, and it's important to understand intersectionality so that these students know that they're not being discriminated against, that they know that each one of them is going to be treated the same, that they're not going to be the underdogs always trying to prove that they're innocent or that they're being pushed against. Thank you.